Hello, welcome back. I'm Laura, and in this video, we're going to cover how to do epoxy repairs. So there are a number of different reasons you might want to do an epoxy repair. One of the most common is when you find rot in your home or building. The other reason you might want to use epoxy repairs if you have a section of wood that has been damaged. In this case, we have a section of wood missing from this window sash. The interior of this is covered with a stain, which brings out the natural beauty of the wood, but it also typically would require a replacement of the style or a splice in. And that's because with the epoxy, we're going to get the stability that we want with this style, but it's not going to look exactly like the wood. And so it's going to be very obvious that we did that repair. But in this case, because it's an example window, we're going to actually do the epoxy repair so that we can learn how to rebuild this part of the sash. We want to make sure that our surface is relatively clean. You can sometimes take a wire brush or a stiff bristle brush to do this. This area is pretty clean already. So once we do that, we can move on to the first part of our process, which is to mix our two-part liquid epoxy. What we want to do is just saturate it enough and let that sit so that it'll adhere to the moldable epoxy, which we're going to apply after it. I have my two parts here. I'm going to just pour this first one. I'm going to pour roughly equal amounts. See, we have part A and part B. Then we just are going to combine it into 1 cup. And what you want to make sure is that it's going to be a consistent color. And we're going to let that sit for just a second. So now that we've let this sit for just a second here, we're going to work on applying just a layer of this to our bare wood. When this penetrates into the wood and soaks in, it's going to actually allow that moldable epoxy to adhere a little bit better. That moldable epoxy isn't just going to sit on top of the wood, but instead it's going to adhere to this liquid wood and it will all harden together. What's happening is actually a chemical process. And so often the more that you apply, the quicker that chemical reaction will end up happening. We can work on mixing the moldable epoxy while we wait. We want to make sure that when we're taking both of these epoxies out of their bins, that we do not want to cross-contaminate the other one. You want them to be close in similar amount and size. And these are different colors, which will help you differentiate if you ever kind of lose track. All you do is you just kind of mush it together. Do you want to mix that for me? So you kind of have to think about how much you might need to apply. We're not going to completely fill this area, but we are going to kind of overfill this top chunk. And then afterwards, we'll end up cutting it back and shaping it so that it'll kind of blend in much better. And so this is called Absolve, and you're going to put a little bit on the blade of your disposable putty knife so that this won't stick nearly as much when we end up shaping this in place. I'm gonna grab that from you. The color of that is really consistent. We don't have any more of like the swirling of the brown or the white. So this is how you know it's going to be ready to be applied. We're now going to just kind of press this into place. So usually I do kind of like a rough fit first, and then I will go back and do a little bit more of like the fine shaping of it. And what you can then do is you're gonna run it across. And the goal here is just to make it a little bit smoother so that when you come in and sand it and shape it afterwards, it's just gonna be a little bit easier to handle. This section right here is a little different because this hole in the side is where the sash cord knot will end up sitting. Here we're gonna just try to not fill that particular space in because we want that to be kind of more open. So now that we have roughly shaped this in place, we're going to let it sit for a few hours and cure until it's hard enough to shape with sandpaper or chisels or saws. We are now going to talk about how to shape your epoxy. You want to make sure that it's fully solid before you start shaping it, otherwise it can get very sticky, especially if you're using sandpaper. So we created a moderately flat edge, not too much, but just a little bit overfilled. And I'm just going to take my sandpaper here and work my way across it, blending it in. Really follow this line of the existing style. And you can use these existing pieces to kind of guide your sandpaper or your chisel. And so the next step after kind of getting this flattened to where we would like it would be to chisel out the channel that the sash cord sits in and take out any additional material that would be in this side hole where the sash knot would sit. The structural integrity of the epoxy and the wood together will bring it back up to full capacity, so you don't have to worry about it breaking or falling apart. Then you can paint over it and you generally won't be able to tell that you've used epoxy rather than real wood.